Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Grey's Anatomy Season 3, Episode 2, I Am a Tree. Episode in a nutshell is a brief summary of what happened in the episode. So as always, we'll start by recapping the patients. First patient was Benjamin, who had a brain tumor that caused him to impulsively state every thought that crossed his mind, which unfortunately was quite a few rude thoughts about everybody in his vicinity, especially his sibling, who unfortunately does end up dying in the surgery to remove the tumor. Then we have the second patient who is there to get surgery on her lung cancer. But Dana kind of instead goes off the deep end. She orders a bunch of cakes when she knows she's not supposed to be eating. She does wheelchair races in the hallways. She shoplifts from the gift shop various chocolates. And then she ultimately ends up checking herself out of the hospital without the surgery, going to Joe's bar, trying one of every drink, and then sleeps with Alex in the bathroom before ultimately deciding to go back to the hospital. And she does all of this because she felt like for the last decade of her life, she had done absolutely nothing, and she had lived what should have been basically an extremely healthy life and then ended up getting cancer and was having a hard time coming to terms. But by the end of the episode, she's come enough to terms to want to try to beat cancer so that she can experience all of the living that she's done in this one day going forward in her life. So she does go back to the hospital ultimately. And then the last episode is a boy named Harley who, while out with his friends, unfortunately ends up crashing and he gets a tree stuck right through his body, which the surgeons all have to kind of team up around and first start operating around the tree before to get him stabilized before they can then go into actually saving his life. And by the end of the episode, we do see Bailey and Harley's father Jeffrey having a conversation about going soft and how the dad felt that he could have prevented it had he been as strict as he was before the divorce with his son. But ultimately, we do learn that Harley does survive having the tree removed. And so that brings us to our drama side of things. So the first is Bailey. Throughout the episode, she's basically treating everybody a lot more harshly and avoiding talking to Izzy or thinking about Izzy, almost treating Alex like he is Izzy, and she kind of goes through the episode like that until she comes across Jeffrey Hernandez at Joe's bar, who's talking about how he went soft after the divorce, and then she comes to realize that she also had gone soft, and so by the end of the episode, she does approach Izzy, who has been baking all episode as a way to, well, as an outlet for her grief, and has baked way too many muffins, and Bailey comes in and basically says she bears some responsibility because Izzy couldn't have stopped herself from cutting the wire, but if Bailey hadn't gone soft, hadn't had a baby, hadn't started to get distracted, get busy, stop teaching, she would have been able to stop Izzy. She would have been able to treat them all better. That a lot of the chaos that her interns are causing, she could have, if she was still teaching them the way she was at the start, she could have prevented it, or she feels that she could have prevented it, and then offers Izzy the opportunity to come back. Meanwhile, Addison, of course, found the panties, put them on the bulletin board at the end of the last episode. This is the episode where everybody finds the panties and is basically trying to humiliate everybody. Everyone's gathered around. who did it. Bailey knows it was one of her interns. Obviously, it was Meredith. But Callie steps up, claims the panties before leaving, which leaves George jealous the entire episode, trying to figure out if she has like extra panties. Why was she wearing such lacy panties? He thought he had seen them all. Now there's like this random pair, so on and so forth. Of course, by the end of the episode, they realize, or rather, Callie confesses, but she enjoys him being jealous throughout the episode. Meredith, meanwhile, has a choice to make between Derek and Finn, and by the end of the episode, decides that she can't yet make a decision and decides she wants to explore all of her options available to her, and so offers both Derek and Finn, while they are together, open and honest conversation, which is rare on the show, but open and honest conversation that she wants to try dating both of them in order to try to make her ultimate decision on which one of them she would like to spend her life with, or at least become exclusive with. And then she leaves them to decide, and both of them have a conversation with each other, saying neither one of them want to bow out. Addison spends the entire day drinking at Joe's bar, but after asking the day off from Richard in his office, where we find out he's been sleeping in his office because Adele has kicked him out. And they end up, no, they don't end up doing anything. Well, they supposedly off screen have a conversation because Richard then brings it up to Derek later. But anyways, Addison goes to Joe's bar, drinks there all day. He calls her a cab at the end, at 10 o'clock. She leaves. We then have Derek going to the hotel room that she has rented to basically confirm and have that conversation that their marriage is over. However, as they're having this conversation, out walks Mark Sloan, whom she had the affair with back in New York anyways, and he's like, suddenly I don't feel so bad anymore. And he leaves, and that's our finale shot of the episode. But there's still some more drama we haven't talked about. So Callie is found out about being living in the hospital. Richard then says he has to kick her out. She comments on the fact that he's sleeping in his office, and so he then realizes he'll also have to leave the hospital if he's kicking her out. And Callie, with her suitcase, then confesses to George that they weren't her panties, but that she really enjoyed him being jealous, and then they head home, and she supposedly will be moving in with him, or at least presumably will. That's what's implied at this point. Um, and then final bit of drama that's not as interconnected is Christina. She basically gets caught in a compromising position by Burke's parents who have come to visit him. Then, after that rather poor first impression, gets invited to coffee by his mother. She requests he save her. While they have coffee, Burke then comes down out of his room, and then the mother basically calls her selfish for getting her son out of his sick bed, and essentially scolds Christina for that, calling her selfish, saying it won't last. And Christina then kind of doubts their relationship and how long it will last, because if the mother doesn't like her, will that impact Burke and Burke's opinion of her? But then, as she's leaving at the end of the episode, Burke's father walks by and essentially says to hang in there. And that's what happened in the episode. So now that we've summarized everything that happened in the episode, it's now time to rank the episode. As always, we'll be ranking on our mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. And so to start, we have our single episode supporting character introductions. We have the lung cancer patient who goes on a bit of a bender, Dana Seabury. Then we have Benjamin O'Leary, who is the brain cancer patient who goes, well, doesn't go, but he ends up passing in surgery after basically insulting everybody and anybody because he has no impulse control to keep his thoughts in. Then we have Jeffrey Hernandez, who is the father of a patient, Harley Hernandez, Harley basically comes in with the tree and then is in an operation. Otherwise, we don't really see him as a character. However, Jeffrey Hernandez is the one that the doctors interact with, and especially Bailey, who has that special moment with him that helps her to return to committing to being a teacher. That's how I'll put it. And then we have Donald Burke, who is Preston's father, and they're each worth 1 point, bringing us to 4. Then we have +2 for our multi-episode supporting character introduction, and this is June Burke, who is Preston's mother. And surprisingly enough, while the father does not recur, the mother does. Then we have the impactful, memorable moment line, etc. And for me, this is a very memorable moment when Callie takes the underwear off of the bulletin board. Last episode, we saw Addison put the panties on the bulletin board, but I feel like the actual memorable scene is when the panties come off of the bulletin board, and that is why this episode I'm giving it the 3 points. Then we have a multi-season main character development, which is when Richard discovers Callie living in the hospital and then kicks her out. Multi-season main character growth, which of course is Bailey realizing that she is partially at fault because she went soft and stopped teaching her interns properly, and she knows that in the past, the way she was before having a baby, before going soft, she never would have allowed that to happen, and therefore, even if Izzy never would have been able to stop herself from cutting the wire, had she been more attentive, had she been teaching more strictly as she had before, she would have been able to stop Izzy from cutting the wire. And I feel that that is character growth, coming to the realization that, she had gone soft and now making the commitment to do better going forward. And that brings us to the end of our positive points for this episode. We do, however, have some negatives. First negative is the negative messaging or behavior, which I feel is Addison's. So obviously she's grieving. She's discovered the end of her marriage. She found out in a way that was not planned, as Derek did plan to talk to her that day at work about the end of their marriage, but then found out that she already knew because of the panties, and that wasn't how he had wanted her to find out. But ultimately she did. And the drinking, I'm like, she asked for the day off, which is responsible. She went to the bar. She asked the bartender to call her a cab at 10, knowing that she was going to be out of sorts and drunk by the end of the day. So I feel like she handled that all very responsibly. However, the sort of okay, so she sleeps with Mark, and we know that her and Mark had an affair in New York. That's what Derek walked in on. But at this point, because of the circumstances immediately before it, it feels like retaliation. It feels like you cheated on me, so I'm going to go back and re-cheat on you, or cheat on you again with your best friend or former best friend at this point. And I don't think that's healthy or acceptable behaviors because it feels like retaliation just because of the timing. And I don't think that there would have been anything wrong with her reconnecting with Mark after the end of the marriage, as they did seemingly have some form of relationship beforehand. But the timing and the way it happened, and the fact that she was also drunk out of her mind, makes it feel a bit icky, and that's why I decided to give it a negative messaging or behavior. Feels like retaliation, and now that I'm talking about it, also a bit icky on Mark's part because he took advantage of a clearly drunken Addison, who had rejected him previously when she was sober. So all around negative messaging or behavior there, -2 points. We have our supporting relationships regression or breakup. Addison, of course, found out about the infidelity, has spent the day drinking, now is with Mark at night, and then Derek does come by the hotel room to officially break up and state the end of their marriage. So that's minus 2 points. And then there's also the fact that in the last episode, obviously Adele said she didn't have any time left to give and she walked out of the hospital. We now learned that she's stuck by her words and Richard is now sleeping on the couch in his office as he has been kicked out of the house, um, which I also took minus 2 points for. And then we have our main relationship regression or breakup. This is a regression, not a breakup, but with Brooke and Christina, while it's not necessarily their specific relationship that has regressed, I do feel that when parents disapprove of your partner, if you have a good relationship with your partner or your parents, that can impact the way that you see your partner or maybe the longevity of the relationship with the partner. And the fact, first off, that they were found in a compromising position, which was incredibly embarrassing. Um, the part where Preston is really a mama's boy and it shows in this episode, and the fact that his mama does not approve of Christina, at least at this point, all to me brings the relationship a step backwards, not necessarily between the couple, but in the circumstances surrounding the relationship, which I feel most likely could impact, especially in the future, the relationship overall, which is why I decided to count it as a negative in this episode. And all of that together comes out to, after we do the math, an 8 out of 10 episode. However, that does mean that on our mostly objective ranking, I am a tree, is in first place, and then second is Time Has Come Today. Personal ranking, I decided to give I Am a Tree a 7 out of 10. I enjoyed the drama of it all. I thought the patients were interesting and the quirks of the patients were interesting. I did like that there was character growth and drama. However, having said that, I feel like now this I know is probably like a me problem, but I find when there are too many things happening all at once in one episode, sometimes I feel like it gets a little overwhelming and also like they don't really have enough time to flesh out every single scenario because they've got like 10 different scenarios ongoing. And it can therefore end up feeling almost like an incomplete episode or almost like a not boring because there's so much happening, but it can feel less entertaining from the viewer's standpoint than it otherwise could have. Like in this episode, there was so much going on that even trying to remember everything that happened is difficult because there was so little time spent on it. Also, a lot of the dramas are like the beginnings of dramas, the setup phase of the dramas, and that also feels a little bit like while there was drama, it wasn't necessarily the really juicy, interesting dramas. It left me wanting. That's a good way to say it. It left me wanting not more because there was too much, but a little bit more focus. So, yes, a type of more. Not so much more drama, but more focusing in on specific dramas. And I tend to prefer the episodes where there is kind of that maybe some small dramas as like a background noise, but there's like a focus on this is the main drama for this episode. This is the main circumstance or two that we're following. That tends to land better with me than a let's follow like 8 different pieces of drama in tiny little snippets and not really get any fleshing out of any of them. That that is what I'm trying to say. And I don't think I'm describing it well, but it's the best I can do off the top of my head. And so That being said, I decided to give this episode a 7 because while it is not a bad episode, while there was a lot that happened in the episode and a lot of developments and dramas and such, like I said, it just didn't land for me personally as fully as it could have, and that is why 7 out of 10 is the answer for me. That does, however, leave it in first place. I Am a Tree, and then in second is Time Has Come Today. Which now is bringing us to the series ranking, and season 1 ended with a score of 70 out of 90, leaving us with 77.78%. Season 2, 207 out of 270, 76.67%. And then this episode so far has 13 out of 230. On the personal ranking side, Season 2 was 72.22%, Season 1 66.67%, and Season 3 so far has a tie of 13 out of 230. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 3, Episode 2, I Am a Tree. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.